First of all, I want to thank the ICT for inviting me. I'm very honored. My presentation will focus on detection of radicalization in the new context of the endogenous threat. The main challenge nowadays for intelligence services in France facing the risk of terrorism is the endogenous threat. These recent developments have changed the analytical frameworks and the legal and operational means of the fight against terrorism. I will try to explain how this development occurred, or at least what the main causes are. I will then tell you what consequences have been drawn in terms of organization to best meet this new challenge, and I will finally mention the major threat posed by radicalization in detention. The setbacks of the Islamic State in Syria and Iraq, which do not constitute as many signs, unfortunately, show a definitive defeat, have temporarily had a very positive effect, namely to considerably weaken the quantitative and qualitative supply of terrorist propaganda. What has characterized the period since 2014 is the tremendous impact on our use of Daesh propaganda machine. This propaganda on both form and content had totally outdated Al-Qaeda's propaganda. In terms of form, the media used and the quality of the productions perfectly embraced the imagination of part of the youth through their playful aspect and their adaptation to social networks. In substance, and this also has serious consequences, this propaganda is more simplified, less academic, less oriented toward religious texts, which has made it more fundamentally revolutionary and subversive, and has considerably broadened its audience. Today, this propaganda capacity has been considerably reduced, but it is not totally absent, and of course, Al-Qaeda's capacity must always be taken into account. Above all, the framework, the backdrop of radicalization is the ideological offer and the disruption rhetoric carried by the Salafist movement on the web, in jails, in certain mosques, and in outlying districts. This ideology alone does not translate into a direct terror threat, but it is one of the paths of radicalization and creates the conditions that will make part of the population more open to jihadist speech. Even if there are nuances in the different currents of Salafism, the dominant thought that emerges from this movement contributes to locking individuals in a sectarian attitude or hostile to democracy and the rest of society. Discourses contribute to forming a community of resentment, and individual paths within this community rarely lead to calmness. So this ideological offer of Salafism, which is abundantly available, and the skillful propaganda of the jihadists of the Islamic State have in fact created a situation in which the authorities and the intelligence services in particular must now monitor several thousand individuals with concern detecting the most radical elements, and among these elements, those most likely to carry out attacks. From this perspective, the question of integration is one of the analytical factors among all those that can motivate action. France has strong minorities, and the subject of integration is addressed under general policies, particularly social or educational policies. These aspects, of course, are important if we consider the driving forces behind Daesh propaganda and part of the Salafist ideology, which aims to separate individuals from the national community by using identity factors. So, the evolution of radicalization in its current form, that is the risk associated with rapidly radicalized individuals with weak or non-existent links to the identified terrorist movement, has reinforced the need to involve other actors to facilitate the work of the intelligence services. In 2014 was set up a device that I spare you the acronym, but whose operation is based on a toll-free number and an internet address that allows all citizens to transmit information on all cases of radicalization they have to know. The system is part of the Anti-Terrorist Coordination and Liaison Unit, which, as its name suggests, is intended to coordinate and produce summaries for the public authorities. These calls are thus collected and analyzed at the first stage by a panel of reservist policemen who will be able in some cases to reassure the signaling and in other cases guide these reports according to their seriousness. Reports of individuals presenting an immediate threat are forwarded for analysis and processing to the Directorate General for Internal Intelligence, the DGSI, which is both intelligence and judicial competence service, particularly in the field of the fight against terrorism. Reports of radicalization that have been confirmed but without terrorist intent at this stage are sent for action to local authorities in the French departments around prefects in security headquarters. In each French department, a department is an administrative division, there is about 100 of them in France. These headquarters bring together police intelligence services, public prosecutors, and any administrations likely to report or shed light on cases of radicalization around prefects, representing the Minister of the Interior and the entire government, including education and prison services. This entity is responsible for analyzing, distributing, processing, and following up on alerts sent to them by the coordination unit or collected by its departments. The national education system and the prison service are often the administrative bodies that, together with the police and intelligence services, contribute the most to the database of radicalized individuals. These staffs meet weekly to review the follow-up of existing files and new cases. These reports and the work of the general staff in the departments feed a specific shared file. The file of radicalized individuals, created in March 2015, is a separate file and has a different purpose from that of the police and intelligence services. This file now has about 9,500 names, and about 3,500 of the individuals concerned is a sufficient threat to be monitored by the DGSI. This department itself establishes a hierarchy according to the level of threat represented and adapts its monitoring resources according to an internal typology. What characterizes the recent organization is therefore the broader involvement of administrations and citizens in the vigilance system. However, it is obvious that the intelligence services remain in charge of the overall organization. In this respect, the General Directorate of Intelligence, the DGSI, has been designated by the President of the Republic as lead partner of the system, with the possibility of taking into account any file of which it is aware. Within the DGSI, there is a headquarters which brings together all the services which contribute directly or indirectly to the fight against terrorism, which give the DGSI a complete vision of the situation. This system also has the advantage of ensuring that any individual who has been the subject of a serious report is taken into account by a service, thus avoiding deadlocks and duplication. The a posteriori analysis of attackers bring the a posteriori analysis of attackers brings a lot of information, but also frustrations insofar as it reveals a gallery of various profiles. For example, some people have a strong relationship with violence from an early age, but this is not a systematic feature. Similarly, There are differences in the relationship between these individuals and religion. Some have a strict practice, others display a form of distance and adopt deviant behaviors. There is also a strong tension between their sexual impulses and even their sexual orientation and the religious ideology to which they essentially adhere. Nor can we draw very systematic conclusion about the presence of psychiatric pathologies that are not well represented among perpetrators of attacks. So these observations hardly lead to very precise operational recommendations, but they do give indications on how to orient the resource and prioritize the means. The systematic use of human and technical information is naturally the only way to support analysis. This situation has also led to a change in the preventive consideration of the threat by the administrative authorities upstream of and in addition to the action of the intelligence and judicial police services. In the context of November 2015 attacks in Paris, a number of measures derogating from the common law had been taken under the state of emergency. These provisions allowed prefects in the departments to temporarily place individuals posing a serious threat under temporary house arrest, and in some cases to initiate home visits. These regulations were partly incorporated into common law by a 2018 law with strict conditions and strong control by the judicial judge who is the guarantor of individual freedoms. The actions have sometimes resulted in spectacular seizures and judicial proceedings, both terrorist and non-terrorist. Even if their effectiveness tended to decrease over time, they had a destabilizing effect on a group of individuals who displayed their support for jihadist theses. A significant proportion of attackers are concerned by a previous criminal record, whether or not marked by more or less lengthy stays in detention. There is a very strong challenge in the detection of radicalization and the fight against terrorism, which is the sometimes short-term threat posed by individuals detained for terrorism or simply by those who have become radicalized in detention. With regard to the first category, there are currently about 500 individuals detained in French prisons for terrorism, some of them for simple apology, but many for terrorist attacks or criminal associations. Among the latter, who were apprehended at the criminal association stage with having had time to act, and even further ahead sometimes before setting a target, sentences of 6 or 8 years have regularly been handed down. This means that dozens of individuals and nearly half of those detained for terrorism will soon be released by 2022. To these 500 individuals must be added about 1,500 considered radicalized in custody and those benefiting from adjusted sentences out of detention. This is therefore a major challenge in terms of intelligence. France has already faced religiously motivated attacks on guards by detainees and many conspiracies to carry out attack after release from detention or initiated from inside the prison and entrusted to accomplices outside. Similarly, some of the perpetrators of the most deadly attack have been radicalized in detention, such as the Kouachi brothers who carried out the attack on the Charlie Hebdo newspaper. This has led to a growing awareness of the need to create an intelligence service within detention facilities. Since 2017, there has been an intelligence service under the Ministry of Justice within the prison administration. Initially a simple office, it became a national service led by a magistrate. It has 40 people at the central level and 400 agents in various detention centers. This service is part of the second circle of French intelligence services, and as such is authorized to deploy a wide range of resources as provided for in the 2015 law about intelligence. This service is required to work closely with the DGSI. Its field of action is the detainees, but also all individuals benefiting from adjusted sentences, but still in the hands of the courts. By the way, what characterizes the radicalized prison population is that it belongs to the fringe of petty crime and rarely to the aristocracy of the underworld. In a way, the upper fringe of the criminal world, which is the bearer of a specific form of social integration, is less affected by radicalization. As you will see, the new threat modalities have driven public authorities to involve more services and actors, including citizens, in the detection and reporting process. Traditional intelligence techniques may rely in part on predictive analysis, which is based on the study of profile, but this field of study remains largely open. The multidisciplinary work carried out throughout the world on this subject is naturally observed with interest, as well as research in the field of big data and artificial intelligence. But security at this stage continues to be largely based on the classic action of the intelligence services and international cooperation. More broadly, tomorrow's security will be based on the ability of states to fight against the morbid ideological offer, whether it is jihadist, stricto sensu, or presented under the guise of sectarian religious ideologies, or hostile to living together and to the democratic form of government. In the French conception of human rights, the profane is not the enemy of the religious, who is just referred to the private sphere and the individual freedom of conscience, and who is protected in this context. Thank you very much.